Hello everyone and welcome to today's online webinar on Turkey Reach and the role of the exporter. My name is Elena and I'm Regulatory Research and Business Coordinator for Eurasia here at Global Product Compliance Group. I'd like to introduce you to today's speaker, Mirac Pelister, and he is the Regulatory Researcher and Business Coordinator for Turkey here at GPC. So I would like to inform you that we will be running a live Q&A session in the end of this webinar. So if you have enabled the chat box feature, you can ask your questions there during the webinar or after. And it is on the right-hand side of your screen. So if you have any questions, just pop them in there. Before we start, I'd like to take the opportunity to introduce who we are. So Global Product Compliance is a company specializing in global regulatory compliance solutions. We started providing regulatory services in 2008, and since then we have become one of the leading regulatory compliance services providers in the world. On May this year, Sustainability Support Services, SSS, a familiar name in chemical regulatory and compliance services, acquired by GPC Holdings Sweden. The legal entity remains the same, so business remains as usual. You can see that also on the slide. As you can see from the organizational chart here, it's actually next slide, sorry. As you can see from the organizational chart you see on your screens, GPC has two parts, and that is the GPC Regulatory and GPC Analytics. And GPC Regulatory has several divisions, including the GPC UK, Turkey, India, Europe, Sweden, which is Sweden then, Korea, and Russia. And under GPC India, we have three branch offices, and on GPC Analytics we have laboratories here at Lund, Sweden, and then also in India. In 2008 we have managed a portfolio of more than 9,000 substances and have a client base of more than 1,000 happy clients with a 99% retention rate. We have registered more than 1,200 substances, and we also have experience in lead registration and consortium management of more than 400 substances. We also have experience in pre-registration and notification within chemicals and cosmetic regulations. Recently, we developed a portal called Supply Chain Communication Portal, and this portal has been used by more than 4,000 users, including suppliers, buyers, and ORs. Our regulatory services include Indian CMSR, EU Reach, K Reach, Eurasia and Turkey Reach, and UK Reach. Also Taiwan's TCCSCA compliance. Our services also cover chemical regulations in the US, Canada, Australia, Thailand, China, Japan, and Brazil, as well as cosmetic regulations in the EU, India, and the US. So for those of you just joining us, I can see that some more attendees dropped in, so welcome. And now I hand over to Mirac, please.
Thank you very much, Elena, and welcome everybody to today's webinar on Turkey Reach, KKDIK, and the exporter's role in the regulation. And again, sorry for some inconveniences we had. Time to time it happens. So today, what topics we'll cover is basically, if you look at the outline, we will do a little background on KKDIK, what it's about, what the name stands for, and we will look at the scope of the regulation. Then we will go on the timeline, which is very important now, and I will mention why. And also we will see which important roles are defined in the regulation. And I will talk about pre-registration, registration activities mentioned in the webinar, in the regulation, and also other parts such as evaluation, authorization, and restriction, so the crucial parts of the regulation. And then I will also talk about what an owner representative is and how GPC can help you with compliance under Turkish chemical regulation. So what is KKDIK? Actually, KKDIK name is just an abbreviation and a translation for REACH, so registration, evaluation, authorization of and restriction of chemicals. Basically, it's the same name as EU REACH. It's just because of the different languages, it's a different abbreviation. And it came into force on June 23rd, 2017 as a EU adaptation policy, hence the same name. And competent authority for this regulation is the Ministry of Environment and Urbanization. And this regulation both joins, merges three different regulations and also replaces them, which are by law and safety data sheets of hazardous substances and mixtures, which will be gradually replaced until 2024 and from 2021. And it already has replaced and included by law on inventory and control of chemicals and by law on restriction and ban of hazardous substances and mixtures. So it covers all these regulations by 2024. And the purpose such a regulation was made that, as it mentions in Article 1 of the regulation, it says the purpose of this bylaw is to ensure a high level of protection of human health and the environment, including the promotion of alternative methods for assessment of hazards of substances while enhancing competitiveness and innovation. So basically, what KKDIK does is that it creates an inventory and follows all the substances that is produced in Turkey or enters Turkey via importing to prove a safe environment and to protect human health in the country. And if you look at the timeline, as I said before, it began on 2017, and the pre-registration phase, the first phase of the regulation, started on 23rd December 2017, which is 6 months after the regulation came into force, and it will go on until the end of this year, so less than 60 days until the pre-registration phase ends. And this phase includes notification of the substances to the inventory and also CLP notification for local manufacturers and importers, which is actually covered by the CLP regulation in Turkey, but they can be done simultaneously. And today we are very close to the end of this phase. Then by 2021, the next phase will begin, which is the registration phase. Different than EU, this phase will be quite short in Turkey. And this phase will include submission of registration dossiers for each substance. And in these dossiers, chemical safety assessments will be required if needed, and STS and studies will be included, and if needed, also permit application. And after this phase, we will begin a post-registration phase, which will be by the 1st of January 2024. And basically, the most important thing is keeping all the information up to date after that date. And let me tell you that it's very important. After this date, after the deadline of registration, it's not possible to sell any substance to Turkish market without a valid registration number. So it needs to be registered. And it's easier always to, when we were talking about scopes, it's always easier to talk what is out of scope, because this is a huge regulation covering so many different types of substances. However, it does not cover radioactive substances and wastes, and also normal waste material, and substances that are in transit and subjected to customs, so basically just passing through Turkey, and non-isolated intermediates, substances that are held in a temporary storage or free zone, which is similar to in transit situation, substances that are used in defense industry, and substances that are imported only to be re-exported again, which is again very similar to in transit situation. So these types of substances are not covered by this regulation. And KKDIK regulation, Turkish Huge regulation, is consisting of 12 parts. Obviously, the most important parts are part 2 to part 8, because they cover the most main parts of the regulation, which are about registration, data sharing, information in the supply chain, downstream users, evaluation, authorization, and restriction. And we will talk about all these parts. So when we wanted exemptions about registration, the first part of the regulation, the R of the REACH, Substances that are imported only to be used in biocides and plant protection, meaning that they are actively used in these kind of products, they are exempted from registration. And medicines, human or veterinary medicines, are also exempted from registration. Substances that are mentioned in Annexes 4 and 5, which are about natural occurring substances, basically. It could be water, it could be some minerals, it could be fatty acids, unless they are chemically modified. So if they're chemically modified, they're not exempted. But if they are in the form that they're found in nature, then they are exempted from registration. Polymers are exempted. However, it's a bit of a delicate subject because it needs to be, the substance needs to be meeting the definition mentioned in the regulation. So it's about the molecular weight distribution of the polymeric chains. If it fits the definition, then only the monomers need to be registered. However, if it does not meet the definition, then it needs to be registered as polymer. Reisolated intermediates and transported intermediates are exempted from registration. Substances that are recycled in Turkey that is registered before. This might confuse you a little bit, but this is about substances that have been already registered in Turkey before via manufacturing or maybe importing, and then later exported outside of Turkey, and then re-imported again as a waste material, and now to be recycled. Since it's already registered before in Turkey, so the ministry knows about the substance and the supply chain. So it does not need to be registered again. Substances that are exported from a supply chain and re-imported by the same supply chain. This is kind of similar to the recycling situation, only that it doesn't need to be a waste material in this case, that if it goes out of Turkey and then gets back to Turkey again in the same supply chain, if it can be proven, then it's again exempted from registration. And of course, food and feedstock, and substances that are less than 1 tons per year. So what do we need for registration? We have some data requirements that we need to show to the ministry. And as you can see from this chart, the general requirement, the most basic requirement, is of course the identification of the registrant and the substance, and information on production and usage of the substance for registrant, and also the classification and labeling information of the substance. And these are all mentioned in Annex 6, and this is valid for all tonnage bands. And then if the substance fits in the first tonnage band, which is 1 to 10 tons per annum, if the substance is not hazardous, only physicochemical properties are needed. And if it's hazardous, then toxicological and ecotoxicological properties are also needed. And these are mentioned in Annex 7 of KKDIK. Additional to these, if the substance fits under 10 to 100 tons per annum, then also exposure information is needed as mentioned in Annexes 7 and 8, and also a chemical safety report is needed from any tonnage band above 10. And also it's important to know that still, for example, physicochemical properties and toxicological, ecotoxicological properties are needed, but now in more detail. So as we go to a more heavier tonnage band, the more detailed information we need. And if the substance falls under 100 to 1,000 tons per annum, then we need now test proposals to prove physicochemical properties mentioned in Annex 9. And if it's more than 1,000 tons per annum, then now we need to test proposals for ecotoxicological and toxicological properties, as mentioned before. However, if the substance is an isolated intermediate, we have some exemptions and we have less tonnage bands. Basically, it's either less than 1,000 tons per annum or more. And again, the most basic general requirement is information mentioned in Annex 6 as before. However, now if the substance falls under 1 to 1,000 tons per annum, then we need details of risk management measures, physicochemical properties, effects on human health and environment, and standard testing regime information if it's not properly secured. If it's properly secured, then this is, there's an information exemption regarding this Annex 11 standard testing regime information. And if it's more than 1,000 tons per annum, then physicochemical, toxicological, and ecotoxicological properties are also needed to be submitted. If the chemical safety report is needed, which is more than 10 tons per annum, there's an exemption actually. If the substance is in a mixture and it's less than the defined threshold in Annex 1 of CLP regulation, or if it's less than 0.1 weight% of chemical, if it's a PBT or VPVB substance. And this report includes human health hazards, physical chemical hazards, environmental impact and hazards, and also PBT and VPVB evaluation. And this can only be prepared by a certified chemical safety assessment expert by accredited institution in Turkey. And this report is only in Turkish. And also, if safety data sheet is needed, again, because as I mentioned in the first slide, that this regulation is replacing also the SDS regulation. Right now, until 2021, another the person who is certified according to this SDS regulation can also author SDSs. However, from 2021 and until 2024, there's this transition period where both types of certificate is valid. However, after 2024, only a chemical safety assessment expert can prepare the safety data sheets in Turkish. And it's needed if the substance is hazardous according to CLP regulation, if it's PBT substance, if it's SVHC, and also in candidate for authorization list, which is empty yet. And also as SDS in Turkish regulation is complying to global harmonized system, so it has a standard 16 headings. And again, last information about registration part. Joint submission is possible as in EU REACH, and applicants need to appoint a leader in such a case. And then leaders apply first, and the others will follow by submitting only the necessary parts, and by citing the necessary information from the leader. If the Safe Substance Information Exchange Forum cannot appoint a leader for this dossier, then ministry will appoint a leader. And the draft fee structure is published according to this fee structure. The lowest fee, the cheapest one, is for small enterprise, and it's a joint submission. And if it's at the first tonnage band, which is 1 to 10 tons per annum, then it's approximately €5. And the most expensive fee, the highest value, is for a large enterprise doing a self-submission for a substance that is more than 1,000 tons per annum, and that's approximately €1,500. Full draft of this structure is available in English and also in Euro equivalents on our website, GPC Gateway, which I will also talk about later. So registration activities are done and you have just submitted your dossier. What happens is that ministry gives an application number and date to your dossier, and then ministry checks your dossier, notifies within 3 weeks. However, this check is only about if you have filled the correct part, the needed parts of the dossier. So it's not evaluation or check of if the information is correct or not. It's just if you have submitted a proper application or not. And if there's a missing part, the ministry gives a deadline to you to correct this application. If there's no missing part, then ministry decides whether to accept or not, basically. And if you have missing parts and have not met the deadline, then your application is refused and there's no refund on that. However, if you have met the deadline or you don't have any missing part, then ministry will evaluate your dossier, and during this you will they will issue you a substance registration number and also date, so you can then continue your business as regular. And about the evaluation part, the E of REACH, we can talk about two different evaluations here. One is about the evaluation of test proposals, which we talked before, and this is for information on Annexes 9 to 11. And CMR PBT substances are prioritized, of course, and possible decisions of such evaluation of test proposals is that ministry can say, okay, yeah, conduct a test, or ministry can say, so you need to change the conditions of this testing, or they might request extra tests, or they might refuse the test proposal or in case of mutual proposal, then ministry might decide who to conduct the test. And also about the compliance of the dossier, the compliance check evaluation. This is about the technical evaluation of the dossier. So now the ministry is checking if the information is correct or not. And then ministry might decide to ask for extra information within 12 months. Authorization part. It's required for substances mentioned in Annex 14, which is empty now. But biocidals, plant protection products, cosmetics, food contact materials, and substances used in scientific R&D, human and veterinary medicines, and food products are exempted from authorization, even if that substance might be included in Annex 14. If it has such usages, then it's exempted for authorization. And Article 47 defines the SVHC, substance with very high concern. And basically, it's the criteria is if the substance is CMR, ED, endocrine disturbing, or PBT substance, then it is an SVHC substance. So unlike EU REACH, EU regulation, there isn't a list of SVHC substances, rather a criteria, and I think approximately 6,000 substances fit this criteria. But a candidate list for Annex 14 will be prepared by ministry later, and that will be prepared according to Article 49. And Annex 14 will be annually updated by Ministry of Environment and Urbanization considering candidate lists. Requirements for the application if your substance is included in the authorization list, Annex 14, and it's not exempted from authorization. Of course, you need to submit the identification of substance and applicant, and also usages, what you're going to use the substance for, and chemical safety report if not already presented in the registration dossier, and analysis for alternatives, including R&D studies, basically, for this substance, and a substitution plan and timeline of suggested actions, and optionally a socioeconomic analysis according to Annex 16. And if there's an application already before for the same substance, if the necessary agreements are arranged, then the applicant can cite the previous studies and documents of the previous applicant. If you look at the right side of the screen now, there's a little chart, a timeline or process scheme, how this works. Basically, after you submit the application for a permit, ministry will decide within 10 months and publish an opinion. And this opinion includes risk assessments and also socioeconomic analysis. And ministry asks for opinions on alternatives of this substance or process, detailed information and extra information if there are. And third parties are welcome to participate in this opinion. And these could be some other institutions, universities, colleges, or like other ministries, basically. And applicants need to reply within 60 days to this opinion. And then ministry will eventually come to a final decision. And after this decision, within 90 days, the applicants will be notified. The important part here is after an applicant receives a permit, the ministry will give a review time for that, review date. Until that date, at least 18 months before, the applicant should prepare a review report, because ministry does not want these substances, basically those SVHC substances, to be used. Ministry wants them to be replaced because they pose some danger to human health or environment. So the substance need to be reviewed by the applicant, and if there are any possible alternative methods or substances that they need to actually change as soon as possible. And ministry will decide if at the review date, if this substance can be replaced, then they won't give you a permit anymore. And restriction part, the last part of the regulation basically is for the substances mentioned in Annex 17. And any operation on said usage mentioned in Annex 17 is forbidden. So Annex 17 has two columns. On the left column, you see the substances or substance groups. On the right column, you see the usages. And if only the substance is not an on-site isolated intermediate, then it cannot be used in the mentioned usages. Currently, 67 entries are there with varying sub-entries and mentioned total 91 case numbers. And finally, the roles in KKDIK. What are the most important roles in this regulation? There are more roles than you see here, but these are the most important ones, as we all know that manufacturer and importer has the most responsibilities. So local manufacturer and local importer in Turkey normally have the responsibility to register and do all other necessary compliance about the substance. And downstream users only need to notify that they're using this substance in the supply chain for mentioned usages. However, a manufacturer that is not in Turkey, that resides outside of Turkey, can appoint an only representative, which will take the responsibilities of the importer, and the importer will become a downstream user then, which we will talk on the next slide. And then the outside, the foreign manufacturer can also comply with the Turkish regulation. There's also a role mentioned as third-party representative in the regulation that is only for local companies in Turkey. And that's basically for the mutual submission agreements, and also for what do you call it? If the company does not want to give some information, then third-party representatives work for that as well. And now, if you look at how this OR situation works, basically, let's say we have a manufacturer outside of Turkey, and we have a supply chain in Turkey. Basically, two different supply chains from the same manufacturer, and we can see that there are two importers with different downstream users. If this manufacturer appoints an only representative, then the importers in the supply chain become also downstream users, so they don't have to register these substances and comply. They only need to notify their usages, basically, and the only representatives takes all the responsibility of the importer now. Why would somebody appoint an OR then? Well, the positive sides are that there could be cost splitting. Basically, if you're a manufacturer outside of Turkey, you can, if you have, let's say, a substance that is 120 tons per annum, you can split the registration by 60-60, and now it falls under 100 tons per annum. So it's a different tonnage band, and both sides will have positive effects from this because of some exemptions, data exemptions. And also this will give negotiation power, because otherwise, if the importer registers your substances, you're only tied to your importer. However, if you register your own substance, now you have the opportunity to explore the whole Turkish market, and also that you can negotiate the price, because if the importer registers your substance on behalf of you, then they will want to deduct all the costs for registration. In this case, you don't have to deal with this negotiation. And also it will give you competitiveness, because some other importers in Turkey want already registered substances, so you can sell to them already, instead of all those importers dealing with the registration. And as I said, this will give many market opportunities, especially if you pre-register now before the deadline. Because if you do not pre-register now before the deadline, after the deadline, which is the end of this year, you won't be able to place your substance in the Turkish market unless you complete both the pre-registration and the registration. But if you complete the pre-registration now, after the deadline, you will have the opportunity to explore Turkish market freely until the end of 2023, basically, without any major compliance requirements. Also, of course, there are some negative sides, because now you have the responsibilities and costs. But about the responsibilities, you already need to submit so much information to the importer, so the registration can be complete. Or about the cost part, this is not actually a cost, but more like an investment. So now you have more opportunities to sell your product. Okay, what do you need to do then to comply with regulation? Again, pre-registration deadline is 31st December of 2020, so it's fast approaching. It's less than 60 days. It needs immediate action. and you need to register before 31st December of 2023 to be able to keep selling your substance after this deadline. And it's important, again, substances that are not pre-registered before this deadline will not be able to place in Turkish market unless the registration is complete. And if it's not registered by the registration deadline, which is the end of 2023, they will be out of Turkish market. How can GPC help you in this situation? Well, as an OR, we can do your pre-registration and registration. We can also issue SDS or chemical safety reports. We can maintain the downstream user communication and also communication with authorities. And we can give consultancy services on compliance with Turkish regulations, not only KKDIK. And if you go to our website, which is gpcgateway.com, there's a section called Compliance Advisor. And here you can search your substance case number and you can get a basic information about the compliance requirements for your substance. And also you can contact us, send us your substance details so we can assess your substances and tell you how to comply with them. Thank you very much. This is all about KKDIK. And now I will give the floor back to Elena.
Yes, thank you very much, Mirac, for this presentation. It was very interesting, a lot of information. So now we're starting our live Q&A session. So please